Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. So we are studying the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Towards the end, the discussion is, Arjuna has asked a question about the enlightened person. What is it like to be enlightened? And that's where the discussion is. One of the reasons why this section is important is that what is discussed here, these are also the practices which we can do and we are supposed to do. The word enlightened is not used. The word used is sthita prajna in Sanskrit, which means stabilized wisdom. It's a very precise use of the term. As we study Vedanta, we begin to get it. We begin to understand what they are saying. It's not very difficult, really. Stay with it for some time, you get it. But then the next question comes that it fluctuates. It seems to come and go. And it doesn't seem to be it's difficult to make it practical in day-to-day life. So these two issues, that it seems to come and go and it's difficult to make it practical in day-to-day life, is an issue. So how to stabilize this? The practices are discussed here. Now, one of the things one has to do is that one has to stay with this teaching. Shravana manana nididhyasana. Shravana means to study Vedanta systematically over a long period of time. Literally it means to hear. Manana means to reflect upon it. After studying and reflecting, one gets a kind of clarity. One gets a kind of conviction also. But yet it might not feel like a living truth. So to make it a living truth, one has to stay with this knowledge. In meditation, when you're sitting with your eyes closed, but with your eyes open, when you're interacting with the world, still have to stay with this knowledge. What is this knowledge? I am Brahman, that absolute existence, consciousness, bliss. All this is also that same Brahman. And so one interacts from that point of view. To stay with this knowledge is called nididhyasana, Vedantic meditation. Vedantic meditation. Vedantic meditation, when you try to stay with the knowledge, you will find a difficulty. And the difficulty comes from two sources. One is the sensory system, our senses, 5 senses. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. And more subtle, more inward to the sensory system is the mind. So the fluctuations, the wanderings of the mind and the pull of the senses, these two are powerful distractors from stabilizing wisdom. That's why now Sri Krishna is giving a great emphasis on control of the senses, indriya nigraha. In order to stabilize Vedantic wisdom, control of the senses is very important, and control of the mind. So this is the discussion, this is what is going on now. We had done verse number 58 last time, where he had emphasized the importance of control of the senses. Do you remember that nice example he gave of the tortoise, which when threatened pulls in its head and the 4 limbs into the shell? Similarly, we must have the capacity to detach ourselves from engagement with the senses, with the sense objects. By the way, when I'm saying senses and sense objects, it simply means our sensory system and their respective objects. Forms for the eyes, sound for the ears, and smell for the nose, and so on. Taste for the tongue, and so on. Now 59. Please repeat after me. Viṣhayā vinivartante viṣhayā vinivartante nirāhārasya dehinaḥ nirāhārasya dehinaḥ rasa-varjaṁ rasopyasya rasa-varjaṁ rasopyasya paraṁ dṛiṣhṭvā nivartate paraṁ dṛiṣhṭvā nivartate. So 59th verse means the sense objects fall away from somebody who's controlling the senses. We'll see what it means. But the taste for those objects remains in the subconscious mind. Even the taste goes away. Even that the deep conditioning is also removed when one realizes the ultimate truth. Paraṁ dṛiṣhṭvā, realizes the ultimate reality. So what does this mean? Control of the senses. Krishna is saying that the persons who can control the senses, who are not engaged, continue or obsessed with sense pleasures, for such a person that Vedantic wisdom becomes stabilized. But one may ask a question. Even a sick person, for example, if you're very sick, you've got a fever or a cold or you don't feel too good, and you don't really want to go out to partying, or you just want to stay in bed, You don't even want to come to Vedanta class. So a sick person also may not be interested in sense pleasures. But does that mean a sick person's Vedantic wisdom is stabilized? No. So what is this stabilization of wisdom? And there he talks about it, that the sense objects fall away from a person. Viṣhayā vinivartante. What do you mean sense objects fall away? That the person does no longer interacts with the sense object, does not indulge in sense object enjoyment. A person who is disciplined, who is controlling the senses. So you're dieting. So obviously you're not gorging yourself on all sorts of delicacies. But he says the desire for those objects still remains deep in the mind. So there's always a pull. I am dieting, so I'm not going to eat that. And inside the mind, that's very nice. I wish I could eat it. So there's a pull. I want it and I don't want it. You really don't want it because you're dieting. And you really want it because it's going to be very nice if you can eat that. So there's a pull. That pull, that will continue for the time being. That this is what Sri Krishna says. In the beginning it will be there. Even when you have attended lots of Vedanta classes and you've got lots of notes and you have memorized lots of verses, even you're beginning to get Vedanta, still that pull will be there. Until one realizes that ultimate reality, that all this is nothing other than Brahman and my inner reality is Brahman. Rasa means raga, abhilasha. The inner desire, the pull towards sense pleasures. I like to see that, I like to hear that, I like to taste that, especially the tongue, and tasting, touching. Paraṁ nirāhārasya dehinaḥ. Ahara here does not just mean eating. The word ahara in Sanskrit usually is used in the sense of eating, food. But ahara literally means arhyante. It means whatever is pulled in. So whatever is pulled in is not just food into the mouth, but also forms what we see through the eyes, sound through the ears, taste of course, smell and touch. So all the 5 sense objects are ahara, are like food to the 5 sense organs. And a person who controls that, regulates that, for that person, might not be overtly enjoying or involved in sense pleasures, but still, the trace is left behind. I've told you this earlier. I had an interesting experience many, many years ago, about 22 years ago, when I was very sick in the hospital, and I hadn't eaten for 2 weeks. I was on the IV, the intravenous drip. So I was sick. Now I hadn't eaten, and if you gave me food, I would throw up. I mean, I couldn't bear the sight of food. And yet, at night, I would dream of food. And it was very interesting. The food which I had, the dishes which I had eaten, which were my favorites when I was a kid, I thought I'd forgotten about them. I hadn't thought about them for ages. And those floated up. See, what a deep impression. Rasa-varjaṁ, the traces are left behind. We may not be aware of it, but it is left behind. We may not think we have those desires. I don't have those desires. You don't know it. It's there. And when, see, the body is deprived, I'm not eating, and I don't want to eat. The body doesn't require that food because the body can't take that food. If you literally bought those dishes, here, you're dreaming about it, eat it. Couldn't, and just throw up. Notice that the place for enjoyment is not really the body. It's the mind which wants those things. It's the mind which has been conditioned to enjoy those things. It's the sense organs supply those tastes to the mind. The taste has really nothing to do with nutrition. The body needs nutrition. A taste is an indicator, which is good for you, which is bad for you. Sometimes taste is a good indicator, sometimes a bad indicator. But taste is basically for the mind, not really for the body. The body derives its nutrition from the food, and that's it. But the mind derives enjoyment from the sense inputs. So that was very, very educational to me, that how the traces are left behind. But even the traces go away when one realizes that it is Brahman. How do the traces go away? It's like this. I remember I saw one 3D movie once. That was the first time it came to India, many, many years ago. We were little kids, and you had to go into the film theater and wear glasses so you could see things in 3 dimensions. And I remember it was something to do with a mythological story. Somebody shooting arrows. And the kids we had great fun. Like, we dodged the arrows because it's all coming out of the screen towards us. And then somebody had a plate, I still remember that, a plate full of Indian sweets, laddus. And it floated just in front of holding it on the screen, but it's floating in front of your nose like that, right here. And the kids had great fun swiping at it. In the cinema hall, you could see kids trying to grab it, and they were laughing. But none of them took it seriously. They didn't feel deprived, that I can't get hold of the sweets, and didn't burst into tears. No, because they knew it's not there. They knew it's not there. When it's not there, it's easy to give up. It just looks like that. As a sadhu told me once in Himalayas, "Ye bas dikhta hai Mahatma ji, hai kuch nahi." It just looks like that, Swami, but it is not. What looks like that? He meant this entire world. There is... But of course in the world there is taste and sound. Yes, there is taste and sound and smell, but there is nothing here which will satisfy you. There is nothing here that will complete you. There is nothing here which will give you lasting peace. The more you enjoy the sense inputs, the more the thirst increases. The more the desperation increases. I had also seen, so I'm remembering lots of movies now. In those days, this VCR had come, tapes. So I had seen a Hollywood movie. I forget the name of the movie, but it was about a ghost. And this ghost used to, in those days, smoking cigarettes was normal. People used to smoke openly. So this guy, before dying, he used to smoke a lot of cigarettes. And he died. And then, I still remember that one scene, he's become a ghost. Of course, it's a Hollywood movie, so you can see him faintly on the movie, like a glowing figure. Now, he's standing on a railway station or somewhere like that, a platform. And in those days, it seems that, I haven't seen it here in America now. They used to dispense cigarettes from these, like now you can get potato chips and Coke and all of that from a dispenser. You put in money and you can get a cigarette. So, this ghost is standing and trying to put his hand into the machine to bring out the cigarette packets. But of course, alas, he can go pass through walls, but he can't catch anything. So he can't really catch the cigarette packet, and nor can he smoke it. And I felt, this is why we are reborn. These tremendous obsessions we have with enjoying material things, once this body falls apart and we can no longer enjoy these material things, we want it so much. That's why, by God's grace, I would say, we are given a new physical body to start the game all over again. Anyway, that was just a thought. So rasa-varjaṁ, the taste for that remains. And it's a terrible thing. I remember feeling at that time, or later when I reflected upon it, it's a terrible thing to have a strong, obsessive desire and no way of fulfilling it. So that's why I guess we are reborn again and again, so that we have a way of experiencing, fulfilling those desires. But fulfilling is a wrong word. Just experience it again and again, and there's no fulfillment. And then we move on. So, raso-varjaṁ, pyasya paraṁ dṛiṣhṭvā nivartate. The traces are left behind, but even the traces are burnt up when you realize the ultimate truth, that Brahman alone is real and I am Brahman. The world is an appearance, like a movie. I will not repeat it, but you remember I've told you the story of the princess of Kashi. So the moment the prince realized that the princess in the picture was none other than he himself. When he was a kid, he had been painted in that way. So he realized there is no princess of Kashi apart from him. So what he desired is a delusion, is an illusion. That person is not there, does not exist apart from him. Always was him. So the desire goes away. Like that, realizing the ultimate, all these desires, even the trace of it goes away. Then, number 60. Yatato hyapi kaunteya, yatato hyapi kaunteya, puruṣhasya vipaśhchitaḥ. Vipaśhchitaḥ. Indriyāṇi pramāthīni, indriyāṇi pramāthīni, haranti prasabhaṁ, haranti prasabhaṁ. O Arjuna, these powerful senses, the senses mean the sense organs, forcibly lead astray the mind of even the struggling wise person, the wise person who is a spiritual seeker and practicing spiritual disciplines. Meditating, praying, and controlling the senses, still swept away by the powerful senses. Now one might think, if the wise person is swept away by these senses, then what's the point? So, in the introduction to this verse, the commentator in this particular book, Sridhar Swami, says, Indriya sanyamanam vinatu sthita pragyata na sambhavati. Without control of the senses, stabilization of Vedantic wisdom is not possible. Therefore, therefore, sadhaka avasthayam tatra mahan prayatna kartavya. Therefore, when you are a seeker, sadhaka means a spiritual practitioner, at that stage, a great effort is to be put in to control the senses. So it's not meant to be negative, not meant to be pessimistic. You can try, but you're going to fail. No, not in that sense. It's just a cautionary thing that it's very powerful. So one must be careful, one must be ready to fail and try again and keep trying, and it's necessary to keep trying to bring the senses under our control. There is a nice saying which says that, alas, I have been made the servant by the servants of my servants. Kinkarasya kinkarehi kinkarikritaḥ. Alas, kinkara means a servant. So by the servant of my servants, my servant is the mind, and the mind's servants are the senses. But I, the Atman, the self, I have become a servant to my senses. My eyes want to see this, and I run around trying to get it. My tongue wants to taste it, I run to the restaurant to eat it, and so on. Sight, sense, sound, touch, all of these things, I keep running around to procure these things from the world for my senses. I think that, it's my senses and my mind. I can control it. Let my mind think about these things, but what's there in my mind, I can control it. We think so, but it's not that easy. We shall see in the next verse itself. But I'll tell you a little story. Swami Nishreyashanandaji was the founder of our movement in South Africa many, many years ago. He was a disciple of Swami Shivananda. That means a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, his disciple. So he was, from all accounts, I never seen him, but from all accounts, he was an extraordinary teacher, extraordinary master, and a yogi himself. So he talks about this idea that it's my mind and I can control my mind. What's so great about it? He says, imagine you have an apartment in some city and your friend says to you that, I'm going to that city, can I stay in your apartment for a couple of days? And you say, sure, it's my apartment. I'm going to give you a note for the caretaker and he'll just give you the keys. You could go in there and stay there. So your friend turns up at your apartment in that city and rings the bell, and a couple of hefty guys come out, suspicious looking characters, and say, yeah, what do you want? And your friend says, I'm going to stay here. Says who? Well, my friend owns this apartment. Look, here it says that it is, let him stay here for a few days. And these two guys, they pick up your friend and toss him out on the street. Now, can you say that it's still your apartment? Nominally it's your apartment, but it's no longer under your control. There are squatters there. There are people who have taken it over. It's no longer your apartment. Our mind is like that. We have entertained sights and sounds and smells and touches for so long, and thought patterns and habitual ways of thinking, prejudices, so long that now when I think, all right, I'm going to think I am the Atman. That's your friend. Let this thought stay in the mind. I am the Atman. And all these hefty guys, that's sights and sounds and smells, they pick up this poor I am the Atman thought and throw it out on the street. My guru has told me to repeat the mantra. Here is the poor little mantra. Look, and it goes to the mind. Can I stay in the mind for some time? And these other thoughts who have been staying there for years and years together, they're big and nourished. They're strong. And they pick up the poor little mantra and throw it out on the street. So it's no longer under your control. That's why this control of the senses. A subtle question. Sometimes these questions don't occur to us until we start practicing. A subtle question is this. What is more important, control of the senses or control of the thought? I might argue, yes, let me enjoy things of the world. Mentally, I am unaffected. If that's, so isn't that all right? If only you could do that. It's not that easy. It's not that easy. It is true. The mind is more important than the senses. If one could remain mentally completely unaffected while gliding through the world, if you could do that, and there are yogis who can do that, but not at the beginning. At the beginning, the trick is always to start with the physical, with the gross, with the obvious, and then work your way inwards to the subtle ones. Another question is this. Right now here the commentator said, Indriya sanyamam vina tu sthita pragyata na sambhavati. Without control of the senses, stabilization of Vedantic knowledge is not possible. Ramanujacharya, who was the great teacher of viṣhayā and teacher of bhakti, he takes up this point and he says, notice what these two verses, if you put them together, you come up with an interesting conundrum. It says, until you realize the ultimate, the traces, the desires will remain in your mind. The traces will remain. You can control it, but the traces will remain in the mind. And now you are saying, without control of the senses, you cannot realize the ultimate. Without realizing the ultimate, desires will remain and senses will be turbulent. Without controlling the senses, you cannot realize the ultimate. Isn't it a vicious circle? How do you get out of it? And there Ramanuja introduces bhakti. He introduces devotion, love. Love is very attractive. So when my beloved Krishna or Rama or Christ or whatever, these figures who are universally attractive, that is put before you. The beautiful stories of Krishna, The beautiful modes of worship, flowers and light and music, and yes, delicious food, all offered to the Lord and taken as prasad. So all of that, when you use those to attract the mind, bhakti makes it easy. The senses attract the mind. Bhakti attracts the mind. You see why, or a great teacher once told us, that why bhakti is important for people who are on the path of jnana, on the path of knowledge, Vedantic knowledge, self-realization. Why bhakti is important? Because otherwise often what happens is that knowledge, when we study this, it removes ignorance. The very nature of knowledge is to remove ignorance. But if the mind is not sufficiently purified, what will happen is, it will be a kind of intellectual removal of ignorance. I did not know, now I know. But what I want still remains the same because of past conditioning. What I want does not come from the intellect. It comes from past conditioning. It comes from the senses. What my senses like. It's not an intellectual decision that I like a cookie. It's a sensual decision. So, at the level of senses, the terms used in Hindi are very nice. It says, desire, kama, desire is at the level of prana. वो प्राण की बात है, बुद्धि की बात नहीं है. That means it's not something in the intellect. What am I? What is the nature of this world? What am I? That the intellect knows or does not know. But what I want, it's not really, it doesn't have much to do with the intellect. So it could be possible, not only could be possible, it often is the case that we understand a lot of things through Vedanta, but the heart still wants what it was conditioned to want. Now, this Vedantic teaching does not work at the level of the heart. It works at the level of the intellect. That's why so many stringent conditions are there for a purified mind. Purified mind means a purified heart. But bhakti works at the level of the heart. Bhakti is nothing other than transformed desire. The nature of desire is, I want the world. The nature of bhakti is, I want God. Notice that the I want is still the same. I want. Not a question of what I know and what I do not know. I want. The world that's replaced with God. So bhakti is very useful in the path of jnana. When your mind, your heart is given to God in any particular form, whichever is your tradition, could be Krishna or Christ, whichever is your tradition, whichever is your approach. So a devotional approach is very useful for a jnani because it purifies the heart and allows knowledge to have full play. Then you can actually live the knowledge and the knowledge will become stabilized. Sthita prajna. All right. Yatato hyapi kaunteya. Oh Arjuna, even if trying. So this person is actually trying. It's not just theoretical. The person is meditating, a person is doing all sorts of, a lot of Vedantic study and trying to control the senses. Vipaśhchitaḥ. Vipaśhchita means a wise person. Wise person here is said, vivekino api. A person who has viveka. Brahman is real, who feels that. The world is evanescent, temporary, transient, passing. I should try to realize God in this very life. Who feels that? Even such a person is swept away by the powerful senses. Vivekina. Attended lots of Vedanta classes. Still, when anger comes, greed comes, can't control. Why? Because of the senses. Manaḥ, indriyāṇi. So mind and the senses, both, they sweep this person away. But the point is, mahan yatna kartavya. One should make a big effort. One should make a serious, dedicated effort over a long period of time to get mastery over the sensory system. If you do not, 61, and then we will see what happens if we do not. 61, he sums up this whole approach of controlling the senses. 61. Tāni sarvāni saṅyamya, yukta asita matpara, yukta asita matpara vashehi yasya indriyāṇi vashehi yasya indriyāṇi tasya prajñā pratisthita tasya prajñā pratisthita. So the one who controls all the senses and after controlling the senses, what? Why are you controlling the senses? Why simple living? For what? For high thinking. For yukta asita matpara. Concentrated upon me as the ultimate reality. Me means God here. Concentrated upon God. If you are a devotee, you are meditating upon your Ishta Devata. If you are a jnani, you are trying to realize the real self, not the body, not the mind. Chidananda Rupa Hashivoham, of the nature of consciousness and bliss beyond body mind. You're trying to realize that. That is what a mystic, a person seeking realization, tries to do. And vashehi yasya indriyāṇi tasya prajñā pratisthita. The realization, your wisdom will become stable when your sensory system is under control. So persons whose sensory system is under control, for that person, tasya prajñā pratisthita. He makes a clear equation of the two. Throughout the Bhagavad Gita, again and again. So what are the conditions for enlightenment? How many classes and courses do I have to attain? How many books do I have to buy? How many of them do I have to read? So, no, he doesn't say any of that. He says, vashehi yasya indriyāṇi, one who is a master of his or her sensory system. So much importance is given to the sensory system and the mind, of course. Notice one thing. Sarvāni, tāni sarvāni. The sensory system in its entirety, not just one or two. Sri Ramakrishna gave the example of a farmer. You have to imagine in rural Bengal the rice fields. So the crop has to be under water for some time, part of it. So the farmer worked hard to make a channel and bring water from the canal into his field. And worked hard, hours and hours. But afterwards, when he came back to the field, he found all the water had drained away. Why? On the border of the field, there was a hole. So through the hole, all the water drained away, which he had worked so hard to bring in there. So even one hole, that means one obsession. Can't I keep a little desire on the side? It'll work like a creeper. It'll come up and cover your entire psyche. So all the effort goes to waste. And the story of the three drunkards, three friends who were drunkards, who got after a night of revelry, they got in a boat and they wanted to row across the river to their hometown. And they rowed and rowed and rowed, and the next morning they were still there, right on the bank. Why? Because they had forgotten to untie the anchor, the rope which tied it to the shore. They had forgotten that. That rope is this being tied to sensory obsessions. So it must be under your control. That doesn't mean that you will not enjoy the occasional movie or the occasional cookie. But it should mean that even when you're doing it mindfully, consciously, it's not caught hold of you. You are still in charge. Suppose one does not do that. So here's the next two verses. Suppose one does not control that. And we are still trying to become enlightened. We're still doing meditation and prayer and study and all of that. Then what happens? Two famous verses. Let's read. We have to read them together. 62 and 63. Dhyayato viṣhayān pumsa, dhyayato viṣhayān pumsa, sangasteshu pajayate, sangasteshu pajayate, sangat sanjayate kama, sangat sanjayate kama, kamat krodho bhijayate, kamat krodho bhijayate, krodhat bhavati sammoha, krodhat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhrama, sammohat smriti vibhrama, smritir bhrangshat buddhinasho, smritir bhrangshat buddhinasho, buddhināśāt pranashyati, buddhināśāt pranashyati. Thinking continuously about sense objects, and attachment develops with the sense objects. From that attachment comes desire. The desire being obstructed, there flashes anger. From anger comes delusion. From in delusion, the memory of all our learning is lost. When that memory is lost, that learning is lost, the intellect intellect cannot function anymore. Buddhināśa. When the intellect cannot function anymore, pranashyati, we fall away from spiritual life. You will notice that there are 8 links here. 1, thinking about sense objects. 2, dhyāyato viṣhayān puruṣhasya, sangha, an attachment comes to. Second, attachment, sangasteshu upajāyate. Sangat sanjayate kama, desire arises then. From attachment arises desire. Third, I must have it. Then when desire is obstructed, kamat krodho abhijayate, anger comes. 4. And anger leads to krodhat bhavati sammoha, darkening, a delusory effect on the mind, delusion. Confusion comes, sammoha, that's 5. Sammohat smriti vibhrama, from delusion comes loss of memory. Memory here literally means the learning that we have got. All the spiritual, all our New Year's resolutions, all our I'm going to become enlightened this year, 2019 is the year, and so on. All of that goes away, out of the window. And then number 7 is pratibhangshat buddhināśa. So our intellect, the decision-making capacity fails, and we make the wrong decisions, what to say, what to do. And that leads to pranashyati. You fall away from spiritual life. 8. One of our Swamis, one of my teachers, Swami Sarvapriyananda, who was here last year, I think, yes. So he jokingly said like the Buddha's eightfold way, Ashtanga Marga, like the Ashtanga Yoga, the eightfold yoga of Patanjali. This is the eightfold way to destruction. The 8 steps to spiritual fall. So those are the 8 steps to nirvana, or the 8 steps to enlightenment. It is 8 steps to fall away. So what are these 8 steps? Dhyayato viṣhayān puruṣhasya. It starts with what the mind dwells upon. Where the mind is kept. What do you mean where the mind is kept? Is the mind like a box or a glass where you keep it somewhere? No. What is kept in the mind? What am I thinking about? In general, my habitual thought patterns. What am I dwelling upon? Dhyayato viṣhayān. If it's the sense objects, things we see, hear, smell, taste, touch. And it's inevitable. You can either think of God or you can think of the world. One sadhu said, he was 104 years old. He said, Paramatma ka dhyan ya samsar ka chinta. These are the only 2 alternatives. Let go of the thought of God. It need not be God in the theistic sense. You are a spiritual practitioner, you are practicing mindfulness in the Buddhistic sense. Whatever your spiritual practice is, let go of that, the mind will go to samsara. There is no other alternative until enlightenment. What happens in enlightenment is, when you realize that there is only one reality. Whatever you think about, it will be that reality. You know that it is that. But until that point, there are 2 for us. There is something which we call God, our real self. And there is something, and the rest, without that it's all God. It's all samsara. So the mind will, if the mind drops away, if it slips away from Ishvara Chinta, the thought of God, it will have samsara Chinta. One or the other. Similarly, not just thinking, love, where is your heart? It can either be given to God or mammon. You cannot be a servant of both together. The New Testament, the Bible? You can't do both together. Why not? No, one will drive out the other. You remember the hefty fellows? They'll throw out the other. So they are inimical. They are obverse and reverse of the thing. You can't take both at the same time. You have to take this side or that side. So, dhyayato viṣhayān, if we dwell too long, too much on material things. One sadhu said many years ago, he was a traditional wandering monk, said, in each human being there are 3 streams which flow continuously. 3 dharaएं हैं Mahatma ji. 3 streams. What are the 3 streams? Jnana dhara, the stream of knowledge. Karma dhara, the stream of action, what you do. Bhava dhara. It's difficult to translate into English. Bhava means our inner orientation, what we really truly want inside. What we really want inside. Our orientation, our intentions, real intentions inside. Honestly, without telling anybody, honestly, what do I like? Do I really like spiritual life, or is it just, I think it's good for me? Do I really like working out in the gym? I think it's good for me, that's why I'm doing it. You know, this famous entrepreneur, Elon Musk, he said something very interesting. This huge industry is there, motivation, how to get motivated. It's a big thing in America, or in the corporate world across the world. And this person who is like an epitome of corporate life, he said, if you need to get motivated to do it, don't do it. Now don't take him literally. We need to get motivated to do so many good things in life, and we should try to get motivated. But there's a deep truth which he points out. If you need to get motivated, it is not, this is what they're calling bhava. It's not your bhava, inner bhava. You really, really don't like it so far. You really, really don't want it. That's why I need to get motivated. I need to read these books. I need to take that seminar. I want to go to that workshop and buy all those self-help books from Barnes and Nobles. Not working. Why not? See, why they don't work? All those books work on what is called jnana dhara, the stream of knowledge. They will give you a lot of information. And quite a good bit of it is correct. It's not wrong at all. It doesn't touch the inner bhava. One guy said, I love playing video games. He doesn't have to be motivated to play video games. No. You have to be motivated not to play video games. So then the question arises, but that's the problem. There are things which I know are good for me, but I don't want to do that. There are things I know which are bad for me, but I can't stop myself from doing that. So the motivation is there, but it's in the wrong place. It's for things which are, I know they're damaging for me. I know they're no good for me. But I can't give, that comes naturally. Bhava is there. That's the problem. The Lament of Duryadhana. When Krishna goes to Duryadhana, somebody said, why didn't Krishna tell all these nice things to the villain? He told it to, all these things he said to the hero, the good guy. And if he had told all these things to the villain, Duryadhana, it might have prevented a terrible war. But he actually tried. Krishna, to his credit, he tried. And it was of no use. No use. Duryadhana wouldn't have come to the Vedanta class. Why not? When Krishna tried to tell him these things, what was the reaction? Krishna tried to tell him that this, what you're doing is wrong. This is not dharma. This is adharma. And Duryodhana said, Janami dharmam. Don't tell me what is right and wrong, because I know what is right and wrong. That's not my problem. My problem is, what is right, I don't feel like doing it. And what is wrong, I can't stop myself from doing it. Why not? Why ever not? If you know it's wrong, why don't you stop yourself? If you know it's right, why don't you do it? Because he says there is a force within me. The way it drives me, I move in that way. I can't help it. Honest. That is a deep human problem. And I'll tell you what's wrong with Duryodhana's analysis. I'll tell you next. But first, notice the honesty of the person. It's everybody's problem. If it were not, we would all be sthita prajna, established in the divine. It wouldn't take us much time at all. A few weeks, few months. The worst case would take 1 year or so. We'll all become enlightened. Janami dharmam nachame pravritti. I know the dharma, but I have no pravritti. No, I don't feel like doing it. That impulse is not there. I'm not inspired to do it. Janami adharmam name nivritti. I know what is adharma, what is bad and immoral, and what I'm doing is taking me down a terrible path. But I can't stop myself from doing it. Kenapi devena hridisthitena yatha niyojito asmi tatha karomi. By some force within. What is that force within? Samskaras. Freud discovered it in the early part of 20th century. And this city was the hotbed of Freudian psychoanalysis. Samskaras, subconscious conditioning. That really controls us. We think we are rational and our rationality controls our behavior. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Most of our thought, our feelings, our emotions, our decisions and behavior are controlled by irrational forces, just with a little cream froth of rationality on top. You have a question? Hold on to the question, I'll come to you. I mentioned this earlier, the 3 great humiliations of humanity. Have I mentioned this earlier? Freud, it seems he said, humanity has been humiliated thrice. First, when Copernicus said, we are not the center of the universe. At that time, the sun is the center of the universe, and we are like a little world whirling around the Copernican revolution. We are not the center of the universe. And now we know more and more, as in 20th century and now 21st century, we know how tiny and insignificant we are in a vast and uncaring cosmos. First great humiliation. But we felt, okay, but we are not center of the universe, but at least we are made in the image of God. Man is made in the image of God. And woman from the rib of man. So. But at least we are divine origination. And then Darwin comes along. Not image of God, you're made in the image of a chimp. Evolution proves that. The second great humiliation. Freud is saying this, Sigmund Freud. The second great humiliation of humanity. That you're not descended from God, you are evolved from monkeys. Then the third, Freud said, then I dealt the third great blow to human pride. We thought, all right, we are animals, but we are rational animals. The definition of human beings, rational animal. From the time of the Greeks, rational animal. We are guided by logic and reason. Seems to be reasonable. Freud said no. That logic and reason is only the surface. Underneath there is a seething mass of instinctive drives, lust and anger and envy and jealousy and the primal urges which the frail ego is trying to balance. The superego, what the society says, you should be like this. And the id from within, which says, I want this, I want that, I hate that, I want to kill that guy. In between is a tiny, fragile layer of the ego. The Freudian structure, the triadic structure, superego, underneath the id, and in between the balancing act done by the ego, what we feel ourselves to be conscious ego. Trying to balance the demands of society for being moral with the primal urges bubbling up from within. And our decisions, our so-called logic is heavily influenced by these irrational drives. You're not a rational animal, just an animal, Freud said. That is what the yogis knew thousands of years ago. Kenapi devena, this is this power within us which is driving me along and I can't resist it. So don't talk to me about what is right and wrong. So what is wrong in this approach? What's wrong is this. If this is true, then what's the point of any attempt at changing? What is the point of any spiritual life, any meditation, or even a self-help seminar? Tony Robbins? What's the point? You can't if you cannot change. But you can change. That's the great thing. People do change. And we have the possibility of changing. We know that we have the possibility of changing. And we do want to change. But we need a way, a training, a methodology, a path. And those are the yogas. Our point is not fixed. That I love video games and I should be studying. I don't love studying and this is my dilemma. But you're not fixed there forever. You can actually educate the mind and the heart and the senses. This is what all yoga is all about. So that it is transformed. Our urges are transformed. And ultimately we come to a point where, like you loved video games, you actually love your studies. You might think that's a tall order. It's not. Aren't there many, many people who do love their studies? I often say, some students used to come and say to me that this subject is so boring. Remember, it's boring to me. It's not the fault of the subject, it's the fault of my mind. Aren't there people who love that subject? They really love that subject. I mean, the complaint usually used to be about Sanskrit grammar. It's boring. But it's boring to you. But it's not boring to the Sanskrit Pandit, who loves it more than anything else. So the subject is intrinsically interesting. Every subject is. Otherwise it couldn't have developed. There are people who have given their whole lives to it. Darwin, I was reading. People get bored with all the taxonomy and the classification of species and all of that. Darwin was crazy about it. He loved it as a child. I mean, how can you deny samskaras? This is a stunning story of Darwin going out into the little woods near his house in England and collecting beetles. There are different kinds of beetles. And he had a whole collection as a child. He must have done things like that in his past life. Otherwise, why as a child would you? Children collect it, but that craze is there. And there's a story of how the little kid, he's caught one beetle in one hand, another beetle in another hand, and there's a third rare beetle crawling along a leaf. If he goes back to his house and puts those beetles in the little bottles and comes back for this one, it would have flown away. What does he do? He quickly puts one beetle in his mouth, catches hold of the other, and then races back to his room to put all three in the three different bottles and classify them. Now, what do you mean about, what do you say? The biology is boring? Here's this little kid who is more crazy about collecting and classifying beetles than you are about playing your video game. So it's not a problem with the subject. It's the conditioning of the mind. And therefore we can change. Swami Vivekananda said, to develop the powers of attachment and detachment perfectly. It can be done. I've heard the story about, there's one Swami Nirvedananda, one of the pioneers in the Ramakrishna order in the field of education in the 1920s, 30s. And those who are from Calcutta, the Belghoria Students' Home, those who have, So it's the first, one of the first educational institutes of the Ramakrishna order. He founded it. Now, the story goes that it was 1939 and the Second World War had started. And so the Swami was fascinated. The radio, the BBC News would be there from the radio. He would listen to it and he would have this map in front of him, a map of Europe. And with a pencil he would trace where the German armies are advancing, where the Allied armies are advancing. And somebody said, Swami, how do you meditate? You're spending all your time on this. And the Swami looked very surprised and he said to that person, but I don't think about the war when I'm meditating, and I don't think about meditation when I'm thinking about the war. There's a big truth there. It's not so easy to do. He could do it probably, but it's not so easy to do. But there's a big truth there. When we are doing this, playing video games, I should be studying. Studying, I wish I could play a little more video games. We can't control our attachments and detachments. Swami Vivekananda used to say, empty the bucket, empty the bucket. I read about Napoleon. He said it seems he could do many things at the same time. He could dictate to 7 secretaries. Some he's dictating orders for the war, another for construction of bridges in Paris, another to a letter to the Empress Josephine, to his wife, and so on. 7 secretaries. They're all busy writing. He's dictating across 7. How is that possible? The tremendous control over the mental faculties. And I think he's the one who wrote that I've got cabinets in my mind. And so, right, he's the one who said, when I want to know the finances, I open that cabinet, I shut the others. When I want to know the war situation, I open that one and shut the others. And when I want to sleep, I shut all the... He had the capacity to go to sleep at any time. Many will say, I also have that capacity. If you have, you are blessed. But he said, but at will, when I shut all the cabinets in the mind, I fall asleep. It seems he could sleep on his war horse. So, yes, what was the question?
Swamiji, talking about dharma and adharma.
Yes.
The question is regarding Karna.
Yes.
So Karna was supposed to be somebody who really upheld dharma all the time. But when it came to the disrobing of Draupadi, at that time, even he put his head down. He did not oppose the Kauravas. So how do you explain that? Here is somebody who is considered one of the epitomes. I mean, after Yudhishthira, he was considered a person upholding dharma. So.
Yes and no. When Karna finally died, in the mythology you'll see, when he finally was killed, and he said, this is unfair. My chariot is stuck in the mud and you're going to kill me now. I think it is Krishna who gives a long explanation, or he points out where all Karna had done wrong things. See, you mentioned one. Clearly there is something wrong going on, and I am in a situation where I can oppose it and say something. When I do not do so, it's a failure of courage. There's a lack of uprightness there. So, Karna is a tragic figure, no doubt. And many people identify and sympathize, if not identify, sympathize with him. True, the figure is drawn in that way. But there are fatal flaws in that figure also.
So is that also because of samskara?
Samskaras, yes. Here is one thing to remember. These two words, please remember. Swarupa and Swabhava. Very important to remember. Swarupa and Swabhava. Literally, if you translate, Swarupa means our real nature. What is our real nature? Atman. Existence, consciousness, bliss. Or in a theistic sense, nothing other than the divine within us. That is Swarupa. Whose nature? Mine and yours and Sri Ramakrishna's and Krishna's and Arjuna's. All of them. We all have the same Swarupa. At least according to Advaita Vedanta, we are all one with God. Our nature is Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi. That's Swarupa. Our real nature. That's what we are trying to understand. And right now we feel I am this body-mind. This body-mind sensory complex. But we are not this. But there is another very important word to learn. Swabhava. How will I translate that? Again, that word bhava is there. Dispositions. The set of our character, basically. This swabhava is not our real self. But it is the way our mind has been conditioned over lifetimes. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us different. In Swarupa, real nature, we are all one. We are all divine, right now. And we always were. But the good and the bad, Swabhava. The greedy and the self-controlled, Swabhava. Where does this Swabhava come from? You see, where does the Swarupa come from? It's original. It's not created. Swabhava, it comes from, it's called Prachina Karma Samskara. The accumulated karma, the conditioning of many lives, that is Swabhava. So what we come with into our lives. Swami Vivekananda says that, like the poet, I think Wordsworth said, we come trailing clouds of glory into this life. And Swamiji said, some of us come trailing black smoke. But it's a mixture. Our Swabhava is a mixture of many lifetimes. So what we are struggling with right now, I love to play video games, I don't love to study. Swabhava, not Swarupa. So what we are struggling against, what we are trying to polish, what we are trying to change and motivate, that is Swabhava. The tendencies within, and they are all in the mind. Remember, essentially, we are one with God, pure and perfect, always. So nobody deep within is a sinner. So is the doctrine of the sinner, is it wrong? It's not wrong. It's the conditioning in the mind. So unfortunately, what is manifested in life and in actions is the Swabhava. So we need to, Swami Vivekananda said, you need to polish the mirror. Need to polish the mirror. Just hold the question. Hold the question, let me just finish this part. So Swabhava and Swarupa, remember this. What is the difference between Arjuna and Duryodhana? Swabhava and Swarupa. Swarupa is same for Arjuna and Duryodhana and Krishna. All of them are the same Swarupa. They are all one with God. But Swabhava Arjuna is the hero and Swabhava Duryodhana is the villain. This Swabhava, the hope is, it is subject to change. It is changing slowly. If we consciously try to change it, it will change. We can change it. All these spiritual practices are consciously trying to change the Swabhava. So when Elon Musk says don't do anything if it is required to be motivated, what he really means is not that you give up all your high aspirations. You just recognize the power which is working within. I require to be motivated because right now my Swabhava is not oriented towards the things which I want. I need to orient it. And I can do it. That's why these warnings are there. That be careful about the Swabhava. You have these high goals, but the sensory system and the mind, they'll sweep you away because their Swabhava is the conditioning is like that. It can be changed over time. Yes.
Swamiji, would you consider Bhishma Pitamaha to be an enlightened soul?
I think so, yes.
And if so, why did he fight on the side of the Kauravas?
Difficult to say. One word, life. Difficult to say. There's no doubt he was a great person. There's no doubt. He took a decision because he thought he was being moral, right? He had given his word to protect the lineage of the Kauravas. So the beauty and the terrible thing about the Mahabharata is that it shows that what is very neat in Vedanta, in textbooks, when it meets life, it becomes much more complicated. And gets very messy. And that's what we see not only in the Mahabharata, in each of our individual lives. That's the very nature of life. So the Mahabharata, that's why the ethical questions in Mahabharata are very sophisticated, very deep and sophisticated. We'll just leave it at that. Dhyayato viṣhayān pungsa. So when you dwell too much on sense objects, what happens? An attachment develops, a raga. An attachment develops. It is nice. It's nice. Worth having. Then from that attachment, at this stage, remember, we think that, I'm thinking about it, I cannot think about it. But very soon you see that it's very difficult not to think about those things. It becomes a habit. It could be, it's different from different people, what our personal predilections are like. Then sangat sanjayate kama. From this comes desire. There it becomes powerful. What is the nature of desire? I want this gadget, this person, this job, this place, that experience, that enjoyment, that parking spot. So I want. This is the nature of kama, I want. And immediately, kamat krodho abhijayate. From desire comes anger. Desire comes anger means parking spot, best example. That's a nice parking spot, I want it. And then suddenly the guy in front, red light, slowly backing into that spot. And you become angry. Desire thwarted. Desire thwarted leads to anger. Desire leads to kama, leads to two things. Kama leads to two things. We can check in our lives. Leads to two things. When it is satisfied, when we indulge in it, lobha, greed. I want more. Variety. Again. Because it gives pleasure. And I want it again and again. Lobha. When it's thwarted when? I know it's possible for me to get it. And now this person, this circumstance is coming in my way. Anger. Flash of anger comes. It's the same desire which is converted into anger. Kama and krodha, they go together. Krishna says in the Gita, Kama esha krodha esha rajoguna samudbhava mahashana mahapapma. This anger and desire, they are born of rajoguna, rajas. And remember, O Arjuna, these are voracious, they are hungry. They're like hungry ghosts. And mahapapma, they are productive of great sin. Watch these. Keep them, be alert about these two. So, kama leads to krodha. always at the root of any kind of flash of anger, there is some kind of desire. It could be good. We say righteous indignation. All right, righteous indignation. You know that something wrong is happening, but even there is desire. Such a thing should happen. It is not happening, and these people are bad. I am good. Hence, flash of anger on them. They deserve my anger. Usually, when we are angry on people, it's often that I am right. They are wrong. Even hatred. It's okay to hate them because they are the hateful people. So they are the ones who are hating. So it's okay to hate people who hate others. No. Anger. There is anger there. You know, the famous Buddhist teacher, the one who popularized mindfulness all over the West, Thich Nhat Hanh. I read a news article that he's dying now. He's back in Vietnam in his monastery. He's about to pass away. He's passed away? No, he's about to pass away. So when he first came to Europe in the 70s, at that time these anti-war movement, Greenpeace movement was in Germany. It was going on, demonstrations against nuclear weapons and so peace, for peace. And he writes, he's observing it as a Vietnamese monk coming to the West for the first time. He says, I was surprised at how angry these peace protesters were. They didn't see the contradiction. But they felt this is bad and it's good to be angry about something bad. True. But still, there's a contradiction there. Kāmāt krodho vijayate. Notice, Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King, here, they fought the good fight against injustice, against evil. But they never hated the people they were fighting against. Nowhere ever you'll see Mahatma Gandhi hated the British. He never did. Some of his closest friends were British. There is no hatred there. And without hatred also you can fight against injustice. And that's where it really becomes powerful. I'm doing something wrong. You're not angry with me. You just want good for me and for others. And I will sense it in you. When you counsel me, even scold me, we are saying, who can scold? Who can punish? The one who loves. Not the one who says, I am more virtuous than you, you are bad, I will punish you. Then the person who's being punished, there's a reaction in the mind of that person. Kāmāt krodho vijayate. Then what happens from anger? Krodhat bhavati sammoha. Delusion comes. Confusion comes. What to do and what not to do. It's not only from anger, actually. From desire, 4 things come. Swami Ram Sukdas just pointed this out. From desire, 4 things come. Lobha, greed. Greed also leads to sammoha, delusion. What is dharma and what is adharma? I overstep. Because I want. What is my diet prescription? My resolution, this is going to be my diet. I overstep and open the fridge and raid the fridge and eat it. I'm saying something which seems to be a common problem in the West now. But that's the classic example of greed overcoming my resolutions. So greed leads to sammoha. Lobha leads to sammoha. Krodha, anger. Anger leads to delusion also, of course. That flash of anger, then what I should not say, I say. Often, harsh words are the most difficult things to forgive. People remember them for a long time. Even after the quarrel is over, your harsh words are remembered. You might have forgotten what the quarrel was about, but because of the quarrel, you said harsh words to each other. Those harsh words remain in the memory for decades and decades, for decades together, for a lifetime, and it hurts. So, anger. That also leads to delusion. Then there is lobha, krodha. Then there is one more. no, so this is sammoha. Sammoha is the delusion comes out of all of these. Mamata, identification. Mamata means mine. My child, my friend, my political party, my football or basketball team. Once it's mine, partiality comes. My religion, my countrymen, partiality comes. So our balance is disturbed because of that. Then sammoha, so delusion. From delusion, sammohat smriti vibhrama. All the things that we had learned, all the classes and seminars and the books we have read and the verses memorized, they go out of the window at that moment. And we react. We react from what? Not from what we have learned, all this wisdom, but from instinctive reactions, default setting. The reaction comes from there. Smriti vibhrama, loss of memory here means not that you become an amnesiac, but loss of learning. Smritir bhrangshat buddhinasha. Buddhi means viveka here. What is to be done, what is not to be done, what is right and what is wrong. I have decided the goal of life is God realization, and this is the behavior that is consistent with God realization. All of that decision becomes, it just goes out of the window. And I react in anger or in hatred. So buddhinasha, buddhinashat pranashyati. And when the decision is wrong, then falling away from spiritual life becomes inevitable. One more thing is, it takes a long time to describe this sequence of 8 steps, but it happens in a flash. That's what one should remember. It happens in a flash. It doesn't matter, but what matters is over time, as we are spiritual practitioners, this should become less and less frequent, less intense, and we should be able to come out of it faster. That's the sign of progress. So, yes.
My question is about Martin Luther King. You were talking about, and the importance of the material world. You said that, we were talking about injustice.
Yes.
And here in the United States, we talk a lot about inequality, especially material inequality. And we see how when you have people living in poverty, it creates a lot of suffering. So I was wondering, to what degree do you have to accord some importance to basic material comfort? It seems like you have to accord some importance to the material
True.
world so that you don't have people living in.
True. If you ignore the material world completely, that can be disastrous too. But notice one thing. All of these people, like Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King, you will see they conform to this kind of austere, controlled life. It's only when I'm controlled in my own life and I minimize my materiality, then I can struggle for the wider causes of justice for others. When my own sensory system is running amok, when I have no control over my mind, then I am a slave to this particular body-mind system. So my concern with material things will be for material things for I, me and mine. That's the problem with most people. What is the difference between one Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi and the rest of us? The most people are so concerned and caught up with this one single body-mind system, this one. So all the effort goes towards satisfying this thing. The less we are slaves to this body-mind system, the more we can think about the welfare of others. Notice, here Arjuna is literally fighting a battle on the side of righteousness against what is wrong. And after learning all this, he still goes and he's supposed to go and fight that battle. That's what Krishna is trying to persuade him to do. He's not telling him to give up all concern with the battle itself. Arjuna wanted to stop. And Krishna said, no. You can do your duty much better and work for the welfare of others much better when one's own senses are under control. Own mind is under control. Even emotions are under check. Swami Vivekananda said, the sentimental and the emotional waste most of their energy in feeling. It's the calm, level-headed person who can work and do great work. But which kind of calm and level-headed person? There are a lot of calm and level-headed persons, and they are doing great work for themselves. It's the calm and level-headed person who has this control over the senses, who has the mastery over desires, the mind and the sensory system, who can really do work for others. Notice that the truly spiritual people, whom we consider to be spiritual, whom you would consider to be spiritual, you will notice that they are also strongly altruistic. They're deeply altruistic. That they always put others before their own needs. Does that answer your question? Yeah. It's not really a concern for material things. It's rather a concern for the welfare of others. Right? It's not really a concern about cars or food or houses. It's so that the others get those cars and food and houses and education. It's actually a concern for human beings. It's a spiritual concern. Sri Ramakrishna also said, he said, you can't have spirituality on an empty stomach. In Bengali, khali pete dharma hoy na, which is true. Which is true. Sometimes one may be misled into thinking that the yogi, the skinny yogi sitting in his cave in the Himalayas, so that is the ideal. And so all of this is not necessary. Society and schools and hospitals. No, absolutely not. Vedanta is not against this world. Vedanta shows us a much wiser way, a more spiritual way of living in this world itself. And when the time is come to go, we can go absolutely freely and happily without any clinging or any worry. Yeah. Does that answer? Yeah. Yes.
You say about control of the senses.
Yes.
What we should strive for. You might be thinking you're doing that, but you could possibly be repressing. You won't know the difference. How
True.
do you tell that?
Yes, you have to be careful because repression always has a side effect. You really cannot repress anything. It will come out in some other way. So this control of the senses is for directing these energies towards a higher goal. In this case, it's spirituality. It could be art. It could be science. Notice, there I think Elon Musk has a point. If you need to be motivated, then don't do it. A scientist who is passionate about his research, an artist who is passionate about music or painting or something, most of the other things sort of fall away automatically. Otherwise, the person cannot achieve anything in life. Yeah. If you're dedicating 8, 10, 12 hours a day to something in your life, the rest of the things automatically have to fall away. That is dispassion. That is vairagya. But there you already have the motivation. Most of us don't have that kind of motivation for something. That should not dishearten us. We can move this point from loving video games to loving studies. That can be done. But wisely. Carefully, wisely, but consistently also. And it can be done. Others have done it, and so can I. Right?
But how do you identify that? Because you might think you are actually controlling, and then
True.
maybe
I'll give you.
something
It is true. It is true.
surprises you that, oh my,
Yes, it is true. I'll give you just one, but there is a very big subject, but very interesting subject. Just one thing I'll tell you. One is, are you happy? If you suppress it consistently over a long period of time, you'll notice something. You're achieving your goals of controlling the senses, but you'll notice you're consistently unhappy. I knew this monk who seemed very depressed. A very good monk, young monk, seemed very depressed. I said, see, what is there to be depressed about? It's only when I have a desire and I'm not getting satisfied, my desire is not being satisfied, then only I feel unhappy. And you know what he told me? He said, quite honestly, he says, see, I don't have any desires. What is wrong there? Repressed. He said rasa-varjaṁ, the trace is left. If you look at it on paper, it's perfectly all right. But deep inside the subconscious mind, the trace for worldly pleasures is left. And the result is, because it's repressed, you won't see anything on the surface. Life is perfectly all right. But because it's repressed, there's only one sign of that: depression, unhappiness. It has to be worked at. Now, I'll give you just one way of doing it. Control of the senses does not always mean you have to go around with a sour face and look stressed out. What are you doing controlling the senses? I'll give you this, look it up. There is a psychologist, Tal Ben-Shahar. I forgot the name of the book. Shahar, Shahar, Tal Ben-Shahar. Happiness. The name of the book is Happiness. Now, he is a professor of psychology in Harvard University. Or you can just Google it, the most popular course in Harvard. It's supposed to be the most popular course at least a few years back in Harvard University, where a classroom, they had to shift out and hire a theater for classes. Hundreds of Harvard University students, undergrads, took this course. His book is full of these very interesting insights. One insight is this. He gives the example of food. So there is eating healthy, that's the goal. Eating healthy is the goal. Now there is food which is tasteless and unhealthy. There's food which is very tasty but unhealthy. There's food which is very healthy but tasteless. There's a saying that if it tastes good, it must be bad for you. So many people think healthy food must taste bad. So tasteless but very healthy. And the last one is tasty and healthy. And he says what is true of this food, if you try to if you indulge in the tasty food and which is unhealthy, you'll ruin your health. If you try to hold on to these multiple diets and be healthy, you can succeed if you have a lot of willpower, but you're likely to fail again and again. And even if you succeed, you're likely to go around with a sour face. What are you doing? I'm eating healthy. But he says a wise course is to do something. When you're practicing something, enjoy that practice. So eat food which is healthy and tasty. And he says, dietitians know it, doctors know it. There are many such foods which you think you will not like it, but you start eating it, you'll like it. They're really tasty. And this is something that you can hold on to. It's a diet you can hold on to. Now he says this is about food, but this is true of everything in life. So all the practices that we do keep a component of happiness involved there. It should not be a miserable thing. Our president of our order, Swami Sarvapriyananda, he said something which really appealed to me. He says, the goal is bliss, the means too must be bliss. The means too must be blissful. When you are a sadhu, when you are a spiritual seeker, when you are a yogi, you should be happy. Not a forced smiley face, but genuinely happy. And we have seen that. The good monks are usually the ones who are happy. Saint Teresa of Avila, she said, a sad nun is a bad nun. All right, we'll end with this. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.